Now let's look at how we can use the modulation lanes to modulate some of the internal parameters, but more focused on rhythmic generation. And for this, I'm going to turn to an old reliable, which is the Korg Volca Sample. This is the version 2. So what I've done is I've taken sequencer 4 here, and I've turned it into a multi-track sequencer, and each of the lanes corresponds to MIDI channels 1 through 8 for channels 1 through 8. You do that by pressing the sequencer number and the track, and then you change the MIDI channel per track, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So this is what the bass pattern sounds like. Just a very simple kind of kick and snare with a bass pluck going over it. Now, in terms of this track itself, I generated this using the Euclidean pattern generator mode. So I pressed Shift and Random, which brings me into Euclidean generator mode. I covered this in one of my previous videos, but just as a refresher, this mode allows you to create a sequence of pulses distributed throughout the length of the sequence. So by default, if it's 0, you have no steps, and you turn it up 1, 2, 3, 4. You see they don't line up exactly on where the kicks are. So if I'm on 7 and I rotate it, they start there. I can shift them by rotating positive and negative amounts. Given we only have 4 knobs, how do we access 8 lanes of modulation? So in the multi-part sequencer, each of the tracks here, 1 through 8, has its own modulation lane. Now there are only 2 LFOs and they map to the entire sequencer, but if you wanted to access the modulation lane, say for track 6, press the mod button, press track 6, and then it will come up. Say I wanted to access track 1 now, press the mod button, press track 1, and I'm back down to tracks 1 through 4. Now I want to go back to track 6. Now I'm back up to tracks 5 through 8. Now I'm going to modulate track 2, so I'm going to press mod and 2. So we are on track 2 here, and this is the mod lane now for track 2 in sequencer 4, and that corresponds to this snare. What I want to do is I want to modulate the using the internal destination. I'm going to select Euclidean pulse. So I press the knob, scroll down there to the int dest 1, the internal destination 1. You can direct the modulation to 2 different locations within the Oxi One. So I'm going to choose the destination 1 to be Euclidean pulse. That's the number of pulses that are present in the row, the number of trigger steps basically on the row. And that will allow us to create kind of ratcheting effects or builds or drops by adjusting the modulation amount. Because I don't want to go too crazy, I'm just going to set that to Euclidean pulse. I'm going to set the modulation amount to 10%. I don't want to get too crazy on the modulation. A little goes a long way here. Now we'll go in and turn on this, and we'll just do it manually so you can hear the effect of it. So you get like all steps filled if you go too high. So you see straight away, aha, like we're getting a variation here. So we could go in and like set there, 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 and 0 there, like this. And here you hear the change in the rhythm because the number of pulses is changing. And even if we go back to the sequencer now, you can see the effect of that modulation happening because as the modulation's applied, the additional steps appear in orange. Let's do the same thing for track 3, which is this kind of snare sound here. And again, I'll go into the Euclidean generator. I'll generate 5 pulses, but on a 15-step sequence. So this will evolve and change relative and shift and change relative to the main sequence. Sounds nice. Let's apply a little bit of our secret sauce, which is the modulation. Press modulation here now, and we will turn the internal destination for modulation lane 3, which is for track 3 here, which corresponds to our kind of the other snare sound. And we're going to set that to be a retrigger. Now, retrigger allows the steps to retrigger, so you get this kind of ratcheting effect. And we'll just reduce down the modulation amount. We don't want the retriggering to be too crazy, to 50%. So now the modulation for track 3 controls retriggering. Let's take a listen. So you can hear the retriggers there on each of the steps. Now I've drawn this modulation curve for track 3, so let's take a listen to what that modulation sounds like when applied to the sequence. We'll just go ahead and we will set the division here to be 1/8. So again, it's running at half the speed of the main sequencer. The retriggering is too extreme because the modulation is pushing the retriggering percentage way too high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here to the internal amount, which I've set to 10%, and I'm going to just change this offset to be -5. And what that will do is it will offset the modulation down so that the extremities of that retriggering percentage are kind of damped down. Let's take a listen. So by adjusting the modulation percentage amount and the offset of the modulation, you can adjust things like retriggering or generation of patterns. We could also do the same thing by setting a LFO, but that would apply to the whole sequencer. So if you wanted to apply, say, another destination here, we could turn the internal destination 2 to be the number of Euclidean pulses here. So things will get a little bit crazy, I think, at this stage, and we'll just set this down to, like, say, 10% and see. Now that's kind of fun, isn't it? See, what we've done there is we've modulated 2 destinations using one mod lane. One is the retrigger percentage and one is the number of pulses per track. Look at that. We can even change the length of the modulation lanes to be different lengths. So here I am in mod lane for track 2. So we'll go mod 2. We're on track 2. And I'm going to just do end and set that to end on step 15. And then I'm going to go into the modulation lane for track 3. Go onto the second page, set end, and now it ends on step 17. So now the modulation lanes are completely out of sync with the main sequencer. So we'll get modulation shifting over the course of the sequence. And this is going to be a constantly evolving, changing organic rhythm, which I have to say sounds pretty good with just some very basic setup we have here in the sequencer. So I hope you found this video useful in terms of explaining how modulation works. You can modulate things internally on the Oxi One, and of course you can modulate things externally. By all means, if you have any questions, leave me some comments down below. I will try and answer them all. I love hearing from people. So if anything isn't clear, or if there's something you'd like me to make a video on, please do leave me a comment. Thanks very much for watching.